But first, I would like to have Associated Students President Hernandez, please go ahead and present your report.
All right. Okay, I can walk.
Thank you, Chair Butler-Bird. Thank you for having us today, and I will just get into my report. And let me pull it up because I have a bad memory. Okay. So hello everyone, my name is Catarina or Kat Hernandez, and I'm the current Associated Students President. I'm a fourth-year criminal justice major with a double minor in honors in interdisciplinary studies and psychology with an emphasis in neuroscience. And I'd also like to take a moment to recognize the fellow students with me. We have Derek Carrera, Daniela Hernandez,
Megan Morales.
Julio Rodriguez.
Thank you guys. Oh, sorry, I didn't have my video going. Okay, you see me up there now. Let me take my sunglasses off. I look a little unprofessional. Okay, so I'm just going to reiterate some notes that I made in my last report in Senate, and that was number 1. I'd like to also, if you didn't know, I'm the first female Guardian Scholar to be the Associated Students President. So I'm very thank you. And I'm really excited to not only represent my community, but to uplift future people like me to take up spaces where spaces are valued. So our themes this year is be the change you want to see. And C is spelled SEA like our ocean, and it stands for safety, equity, and accessibility. To us, student safety means emotional and physical, especially with the climate this fall and ongoing global conflicts in the election. Many students and community members will be affected, so that's something that we're extremely passionate about being proactive in. Equity, we want to identify areas of inequity that can be strengthened, and accessibility, which is promoting all resources on campus to all students so that everyone has equal access to equal opportunities. We have a focus in the college councils for identifying all of the professional development, internships, research, job opportunities, and collaborations to promote all students and to promote, and to partner with career services and the colleges to bring them together in serving students so that all of our programming isn't only directed towards one college council, but applies to all colleges. One of our other focuses is GSA, which is the Graduate Student Association, and our Graduate Student Association president is in the room with us right here, Julio. And one of our executive officers this year, Derek, is also a first-year grad student. And our overall focus is on educating graduate students on campus student life resources available to them, and also promoting AS graduate student travel funding. And those opportunities can be used internationally for research, to Oaxaca, and domestically for presenting research at its conferences. And I look forward to working together with Dean of Graduate Studies, Tracy Love, and GSA President Julio. Graduate Student Association isn't something that I'm going to delegate, but work directly with this year, so I'm really excited for that. And I also look forward to collaborating with Senate Exec Committee and Senate this year. But yeah, that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Are there any questions or feedback for President Hernandez? I'm seeing none. Thank you so much for your report. We look forward to working with you as well. And thank you so much, graduate council reps, for also coming and joining with us today. We're pleased that you're here with us. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the President De La Torre's report. Please, President De La Torre, you're welcome to speak.
Thank you, Chair Butler. First of all, I want to welcome everybody to the 24-25 academic year, and I hope you had some time to rest and enjoy the summer. I want to take some time and appreciate the time to talk to you about a couple of issues, a few issues that I think are important for this coming year. Some of these I have already shared with the SEC, so for those who are members of the Senate Exec Committee, there might be some repetition, but I basically have about 5 areas that I want to focus on today. One is discussing about synergies because of some important overlaps, both at the system level as well as our own local level. Obviously, the budget, which Agnes Wong, Vice President Agnes Wong Nickerson will be speaking to in more detail, some of the legislative issues, some of our ongoing commitments, and then the presidential Global Democracy Fund, which I announced during convocation. I first want to start out with just provide an update on the strategic plan. I mentioned this last term, but we're really at a very good stage right now. We're about 75% of our goals in under 4 years. And again, this is a direct result of much of the work of the faculty and staff who've been working on this very diligently. The other thing that's important is that in the spring, we had a meeting with the community regarding looking at the goals and activities and decided that some needed to be redefined and redirected. And with our new formed strategic plan implementation steering committee, they've incorporated those ideas we'll identify these activities so that we can continue our progress for this particular strategic goal. I think what's important here is that our strategic plan is pretty unique in that it really dovetails well with what is occurring at the system level. The Chancellor announced, some of you who received surveys, that the GI 2025 will be translated or developed within the year of engagement strategy. So this is a new effort to develop a broader goal, if you will. So it includes many of the elements of the 2025 plan, but includes our greater focus on equity gaps. Joanne Brooks is working on a number of these areas, particularly when we look at our Men of Color initiative. She's done quite a bit of work in this area, working with other members of the team. The other important area is that we are also going through our own reaccreditation plan through WASC. And the thematic areas in which we're focusing are redefining student success and inclusion and diversity in everything we do. So many of the activities nicely intersect. And so we're going to move forward with, I think, a number of the areas that will help us not reinvent the wheel, but reinvent the wheel, but expand in existing areas. Some of the things, as you well know, we've established a number of cultural centers. We've expanded in our community college partnerships. We've been able to develop, increase our majors in the Imperial Valley. We have a number of important initiatives like our Ethnic Studies graduation initiative, where we've hired 9 new faculty. So we've actually done quite a bit of the work already. So the good news is that I think we're in a very different position than some of the other institutions. I want to shift now to the second area, which is the budget outlook. So in May, we were able to get the final, if you will, outcome. The governor approved the state budget with some significant reductions. I think the good news is that the compact was funded for this year. So remember, I think last time I spoke, I said I was concerned that we may not get the compact funding, but we did get the compact funding. We also received this year the realignment funding for the shift that occurred from campuses that had reductions in enrollment to campuses that had potential for enrollment growth. And so we were one of a few campuses that actually could absorb greater growth. But at the same time, with this opportunity came a one-time cut of $75 million to the system. And for 25-26, an anticipated cut on base budget of about $8 million. So this is going to translate into a cut that is fairly significant for the system if we're not able to effectively work with our electeds to talk about this type of reduction. So for us, it would be a $25 million base cut in 25 and 26. So what is important for us to understand is that we've always been prudent in our budget planning. We're going to make sensible decisions, and be very extremely careful, in order to ensure that we can invest in our core mission, our strategic goals. But it's important to really, and I want to emphasize this, we are funded based on FTES target. I had an opportunity to meet with the chairs during the chairs retreat and indicate that all the colleges will be expected to meet these targets because in the context of enrollment growth, we were given one target, and then literally in the summer, I think because of the concerns with FAFSA and quite frankly, the fact that some of the campus, the other university campuses could not meet growth, we were asked to do more. And we really could not do more in terms of headcount. We were completely saturated in terms of housing. So the FTES growth is our target, and we've asked the chairs and directors to meet this, both at the undergraduate freshman class and the transfer level. And I've been working with the deans in order to ensure that we meet this growth. That will allow, and just for those who may not be aware of it, that means that they need to take a full load. I know historically we've been somewhat flexible in some areas, but it's through that capacity that we can make the target. The data looks good. We're hoping to make it, but we may need to go into spring semester in order to meet this new target. Why that is important is because without that growth, we cannot get more base dollars. And as I indicated to you, the budget situation next year requires us to meet that budget target in order to mitigate the risk associated to that. So the other thing that I've mentioned, and I mentioned this to the chairs, is that yes, we need to make some decisions on what we are going to do in the context of this greater pressure, if you will. So I want to dovetail this because I think it dovetails with what we've been seeing historically. I'm now in my 7th year as president, and I need to say that what I've seen over the 7 years is that legislative intrusion is growing, not decreasing in the CSU system. And in fact, for those who remember, it was 7 years ago that the ethics studies, the Weber bill, came into being. And of course, I know our faculty had already begun that process. And then we had to relook at it, redo it, reconstruct it to meet the new legislative requirements. Fast forward today, we've had a lot more. Cal Getsy would be one that I know that we have been working on, has created, I think, some concern. But of course, we've also had to look at NAGPRA and Title IX. All of these are unfunded in the context of these new mandates. And although both are very important, so I don't want to minimize that, I'll give you a brief example, and I'm sure Provost Tong can give you more details. But CalNAGPRA, in order to ensure that we can thoughtfully support the process of repatriation of cultural items, funerary objects, human remains, is a $500,000 budget recurring cost to us. And that's important, yet at the same time, there's no state funds that come to us. In terms of the Title IX, the COSA report, we've done, I think we've done a great job in meeting the goals of the COSA assessment. We hired an intake coordinator to support the work of the Center for Prevention of Harassment and Discrimination. Joining the team of the director, we now have 2 highly trained and experienced investigators. We have a case manager, an administrative assistant, and 2 victim advocates. We're in the final phase of a search process to hire a prevention education coordinator. And we recently received conditional approval of an implementation plan from the system. So we're looking forward to approval, but once again, there is no new funding for this. And these are highly trained, very competitive positions at the MPP level. So I want you to be aware of this because that's important. And more recently, I know some of you are very aware of this, and we discussed it in the NCC. In mid-June, the legislature also approved a bill directing the CSU to modify its time, place, and manner policy, with the goal of creating a uniform policy system-wide as it relates to campus activities and providing notification of such to students by the start of this academic year. An email was sent about this policy along with relevant CSU policies and educational resources. And these went out to all campuses in compliance with the state law on August 23rd. I want to just emphasize here that within this context, this broader understanding of these legislative matters, it clearly is created, I think, consternation when we talk about shared governance. At the same time, the requirements are very, very clear. And I think from the point of view of how we move forward, it's going to be key for all individuals to clearly discuss with our electeds how we work within the context of shared governance and how we have used it successfully. At least I can speak to SDSU and what I've seen. There are some other important bills though that I did want to mention that I think can be particularly useful for us. There is the CSU sponsored the tax bills this year that are moving through the legislative process, so they're still within the governor's, we're waiting for signature. One is AB 2005. This will allow the CSU to qualify for affordable housing tax credits. It will also, for the first time, allow us to prioritize faculty and staff housing. So this is important given the fact that we are building in Mission Valley, and particularly with affordable housing, we were not able to prioritize. This is going to let us do this. So this is a very valuable tool for our community. The other bill that is important for us is AB 2395. And this is going to allow all of those colleges and departments with PACE funds, they can now use them for state side and operating side part of the budget. Beforehand, all those funds had to be used only for PACE. Now it means that they can be shifted in order to support funding within the departments on state side activities. We're waiting again for signature. We hope to get that in September. The other one that I think is important, particularly since San Diego State has a number of joint programs, and I know it's been for some of the colleges and some of the departments, there have been difficult negotiations with some of our counterparts in the UC, is that now we have the opportunity to expand doctoral programs, joint doctoral programs at SDSU. So this is AB 2633. It's a proposal that amends the education code, and it will allow us to facilitate joint doctoral degree partnerships with international universities. Right now, we are only limited to joint partners in the UC and within the private university systems. What we've seen is that it is created for some programs. I know our joint PhD program in education has been struggling with Claremont. The Claremont Graduate School is going through, I think, some very significant financial problems, and its future is limited. It could be very limited given the fact that it is not at the level of funding that it needs to be sustainable. And certainly what we've found for some of our doctoral students, it's been a real hardship because they have to pay private tuition that is incredibly high. So this is actually, in my opinion, could be really transformative for us in terms of our ability. It also, I think, will allow us to leverage resources in a different way when you can have a joint degree program with an international school. And certainly there have been efforts by faculty, I know in the College of Sciences in particular, that have been interested in joint doctoral programs with some of our partners in Mexico as well. So right now it's at the Governor Newsom's desk for its final signature. So that is, I think, a very hopeful and positive opportunity for us. I do want to say, on a positive note, I was fortunate in that when we were able to get the legislation signed for the doctoral in public health, that took a while. I have to say 5 years. It took a long time, but I was really happy to launch the first cohort. And no one expected, but we had 19 joint doctoral degrees in the public health program. And it was really striking, even in the Zoom environment, I have to say, to see these 19 professionals, the diversity, the regional impact, and it just speaks to the meticulous planning, I have to give a lot of kudos to the faculty in the School of Public Health, the preparation and the teamwork, and we were able to get that done, and clearly San Diego State has done an exceptional job. So we also have an opportunity right now to partner with the community colleges. There is the opportunity to expand the ADN to BSN programs. There is a lot of tension, I need to tell you right now, with our electeds in this area. And there is a lot of pressure because of the shortage of nurses. So there will be a new funding source. We've been working with the system in creating the opportunity for us to be part of this. Originally, the bill was focused primarily on expansion of community colleges. And the fact that we now can get these grants will also give us greater opportunities. So I wanted to mention that just as the second important or third important area I wanted to mention. The other thing I wanted to do is highlight what are our commitments to existing projects that I've mentioned. One of the, I think, disappointments we've had was that there was an attempt for us to get and the Chancellor's Office to get broader financing through a GEO build, but we were not included. The state decided, the governor, that K to 14 would be the focus. And so we have not been able to get the revenue bonds needed to deal with a lot of the deferred maintenance across the campuses, or actually to construct new buildings. Nevertheless, the North Life Sciences building is our #1 priority. It's now number 11, but we're working with the Chancellor's Office in order to create a financing plan. So I'm still optimistic we're going to move forward with that program. So we'll move forward with that program or that development. We also have made strides in Mission Valley with the Chelsea Investment Group, which is the affordable housing piece. They are going to build 126 affordable housing units, which now our faculty and staff can, qualify if for those who earn 50% of the area median income, which is again an opportunity for us. We're able to complete the River Park, and we are looking forward to, as we move forward, opportunities with the Innovation District.
President Woodward, can we reserve 10 minutes for questions?
Yes. Am I at that 10-minute one? Okay. Well, I just want to mention the Presidential Democracy Fund, which is an initiative that I mentioned at the University Convocation, and just mention the fact that this is hosted with Student Affairs and Campus Diversity, and we will be sending out an announcement with the idea that we would allow for broad-reaching opportunities for students, faculty, and staff to create an opportunity for us to enhance dialogue and community engagement and caring leadership. So yes, we will leave. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. I do see one hand up, and this is Senator Herman. You're recognized.
Thank you. About the hiring from the, sorry, let me start my video. About the hiring as resulting from the Cousins report, I counted up 8 positions. As you said, these are all highly trained people. Presumably, they are all well paid. You'd also said that there's no money to hire them. There's no additional funding. So where is the money to hiring these people? Where is it coming from? And what are we not spending on in order to hire these people?
So I'm going to ask Jessica Renta, who's on here, who's been directly involved, to speak about that, and then also Agnes, if you could add. Jessica?
Jessica's on, and he's
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. And Peter, I'm sorry, for some reason you were breaking up a little bit. Can you just, the last part of your question?
Oh, yeah, where is the money? Where is the money to hire these people coming from? And since there's no new funding, what are we not doing because of that? What are we not spending on in order to hire these people?
Yeah, for Title IX specifically, we have been working for years to secure the funding to support our Title IX operations. But overall, across campus, we do this all the time as different positions, especially management and staff position, as there are vacancies, we are constantly looking at the university priorities, the university needs. We're looking to see, are there certain things that we were doing in the past that aren't as necessary? Should we be reallocating funding to support other more essential needs? We see that also, across campus. I know within faculty, each department might be making those types of decisions, but specifically with a lot of these staff and management positions, we see this all the time for the past few decades, where we are either based on operational needs or legislative priorities having to be good stewards of the state funding and make those decisions, especially with vacancies. And we see turnover on the campus quite regularly, and that's where we try to be as mindful as possible about what those needs are. I'm not sure if that specifically answers your question, and I think it's really hard to say that, this specific position, the dollars came from this other position, because it is done over a length of time. And we saw that with our Title IX positions as well.
I also want to add, so Peter, you mentioned that you counted 8 positions, but they are not all new. Jessica, can you remind us like how many new positions that we have added this coming year? I believe it's 2, right? Two.
I'm sorry, I was just counting off the positions that the president was listing.
Yeah.
And she said this was based on the Cousins report, so I assume that those are new.
Yeah, and some of them are new. Not all of them are new. Some of them were the result of a reorg that we did a couple years ago, when we had a number of people within our Office of Employee Relations and Compliance who resigned to take positions at other employers. So the most recently, the newly funded positions have been our intake coordinator, which was recommended by the Cozen report. We had already moved towards having a case manager probably right around the same time that the Cozen assessment was started, because that was a position that we had identified. And it ended up being identified by the Cozen report as well. But we had found money through reorganizations as well. But most recently, it's been the intake coordinator. We were able to find funding to hire a victim advocate to support our campus. And then our prevention and education coordinator, which is currently in process in the search. I want to be very upfront. At no point do my areas look towards faculty lines to say, hey, instead of a faculty member, can we hire these positions? It really is looking at vacant MPP and staff positions and reallocating those resources.
Thank you. We're going to move on to Senator Shomay.
1 second.
Okay, thank you. My question is related to the good news that now we are able to have joint doctoral programs with international universities. This is really great news. My question really is related to who's going to decide which universities we can kind of line up with or not, and whether there is an open criteria shared. So let's say if I wanted to have a university in Central Europe to work with us, what are my chances to put the work in to actually make that work? Is there some initial set of criteria, and who is the body who is making the final decision whether we can do this campus-wide or not? Thank you.
Thank you, Iniko. Good questions. AVP Tracy Love is working on the process with Grad Council, which is a Senate committee. And that process is an internal process that's being developed. And I do know that Chair Butler-Byrd is also working at the Senate level in terms of working with the statewide Senate, because there's also going to be a process that will be determined at the, for the independent doctoral professional degrees, there'll be a process in the CO office, because as you know, all new curriculum has to flow through us, but then it goes for approval with the CO office as well. But what I would do is feel free to reach out. I don't know if Tracy, if you're on, are you at all? Or she didn't join us. Tracy, are you there? Can you comment really briefly on this?
Sorry, I had to wait to be unmuted. Eniko, as we will also be discussing at Graduate Council, we are working in conjunction with the Chancellor's Office and with AVP McCall on developing the processes, both internal as well as what the Chancellor's Office is going to require. Once we get approval of the bill that President De La Torre was referring to with the international programs, we will also have to discuss what those parameters look like, but I think it's a little premature. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands raised here in the room. Oh, here we have one. Senator Rafus, you're recognized.
I have asked him to unmute.
Okay, he's on mute.
I have a question in regards to the Survivors Advocacy Center that's opened in the corner of the first floor of the admin building, which used to be another conference room. Is that center, I assume it's centered primarily towards students, although I'm sure that faculty and staff can use it. The question I have is, the building is locked to students. So if they're the primary users of it, how do they get into the building?
So I'm not, I'm gonna ask Jessica about this. Jessica, because I'm not familiar with this.
Yeah, 1 second.
Thanks. So Todd, what Todd is referring to is we have the sexual assault victim advocate. We were able to find space in the admin building for the victim advocate. The victim advocate primarily meets with students. However, they are available for our faculty and staff as well. The victim advocate does have a system for providing access to our students. It is primarily appointment-based, and we haven't had issues at this point. I will say there was a time where the victim advocate was located over in our Cal Poly behind a locked door as well. So I think that they had already devised a process for ensuring access for the students who are in need of our victim advocate services. But great question. Thank you.
All right, I don't see any other hands raised. Thank you, President De La Torre, also Jessica, and we're going to now transition to AVP Little as well as VP Wong Nickerson, her report. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for having us today. So as the president mentioned, the governor issued a final budget for 24-25 back in June. And at that time, he also gave CSU a heads up about what fiscal year 25-26, a year from now, will look like. So it's important that, for us to understand what our current and also future year budget reality may look like. Next, please. So before we get into the details, again, I want to do a very high level, overview of the total SDSU budget. This includes operating fund, as well as all the auxiliary enterprises and auxiliary organizations. So the total budget for 24-25 is $1.43 billion. 44% of that is the university operating fund, which is the one that we focus on, that supports instruction, student support, academic support, administrative, and infrastructure operations on campus. Next, please. And what makes up that 44% of the $1.4 billion, which translate to $634 million? That's our total university operating fund budget for 24-25. About half of that comes from the state allocation, state general fund, 26% from tuition, 17% from other fees, and then 7% from cost recovery, like, reimburse release time from grants, things like that. Next, please. So this is the chart showing that, of that $643 million, what do we spend the budget on? If you look at the gray and the red one, the salaries and benefits, that add up to 78%. That goes towards our compensation. And then another 14% that goes to others, that covers things like all the operating expenses, such as utilities, insurance, equipment, software, facilities maintenance, and any other operating cost. And then the remaining 9% goes to what we call state university grants, which is a form of financial aid that we give out to our students. And next, please. So as the president mentioned, there's some good news and bad news in the governor's June final budget. The good news is that 5% compact for 24-25 actually stays instead of being deferred to the following year, as we originally were told that could happen. So that's really good that we get a 5% compact in 24-25. And that's in total $246 million for CSU and about $13 million for SDSU. The bad news is for 25-26, the government basically gives CSU a 1-year heads-up advance notice that that we can expect a 8% budget cut to the whole system. And that translates to $397 million for CSU as a system. And our share of that is about $25 million, and that will be a base cut or permanent cut. And in addition to that, the governor also forecasting that the 5% compact that we expect to receive in 25-26 will be deferred to 26-27. Next, please. So what does that mean also to our one-time money? So that one of the bad news in 24-25, as the president mentioned, there is a $75 million one-time cut to CSU. And SDSU share is $5.2 million that we didn't actually plan for back in May. In addition, in 25-26, if the governor really decides to defer the 5% compact, but still expects CSU to deliver all the expectations under the compact, that means the system will be in a situation that has to come up with $252 million to fund things like 1% enrollment increase and all the other stuff. And right now it's not clear how that $252 million one-time dollars will come from. Would it come from CSU system, or would the system ask campuses to, cover that? Next, please. The president also mentioned about SDSU enrollment goal for 24-25. So we have been planning actually for months that we will increase our resident enrollment by 1,075 FTES compared to our 23-24 enrollment target. And then, as the president mentioned, and back in July, we actually got a last-minute letter from the chancellor's office saying that because we did so well in 23-24, SDSU actually exceeded our enrollment target for resident enrollment by 757 FTES. So the system said since we did so well, now they want to up our target by 757 on top of the 1,075. And also indicated that if we don't meet that new goal, it might impact our enrollment funding in 25-26, that they might reduce our base funding further. As the president mentioned, we got the letter so late in July. It's already too late for enrollment services to admit, a lot more students. Not to mention that we have already assigned all the housing beds to students who were on the wait list. They were not required to stay with us, but we thought we have space, so we allocated those out. So really the one way to meet that target is to increase the unit load, as the president mentioned. So rather than having students taking less than 15 units, that's 1 FTES per semester, we want to make sure that we get closer to the full load in order to make our FTES target. Next, please. So again, a very high-level overview of the 24-25 SDSU budget. We actually have received new base revenue or ongoing revenue from general fund increase, the 5% compact, the 6% tuition increase that the board approved almost a year ago. Also additional state funding and tuition revenue from the 1,075 FTES resident enrollment. And also we plan to grow non-resident by 330 FTES. So there's new revenue from these sources that add up to $32 million base money. However, the new base expenditures actually exceeded the new revenue. So the new base expenditure is $46 million. And that come from a 5% compensation increase, that's $25 million. All the mandatory cost increase, about $12 million, including like health insurance, and then regular insurance and now utility cost. That adds up to about $12 million. And also, with higher enrollment growth, we have to fund instructional costs to teach additional FTES. And also we have some other non-discretionary commitments, as the president mentioned, like, Cal, NAPRA, and the COSN report for the Title IX operations. So with that, we actually have a base deficit in 24-25. If we compare 32 million new revenue minus 46 million new expenditures, we actually have a 14 million base deficit. Now this 40 million base deficit will be partially offset by a planned 10 million reduction across all divisions in 24-25. And the remaining 4 million will be covered by one-time money in 24-25 while we're developing longer-term solutions that will be rolled out in 25-26 and maybe the years beyond. And why do we pick $10 million base reduction in 24-25? That actually, that number is actually very close to, if we look at all divisions, each division typically has what we call vacancy savings, right? As people retire or they leave the university, we don't fill those positions, it takes some time to fill them. So on average, we're seeing 3 to 5% salary benefit in a vacancy savings, and that is very close to $10 million. So we said, well, that's an easy number to achieve. And as I mentioned earlier, we have been thinking that our base budget reduction for this current year, 24-25, and then maybe next year or the year after is about $20 million. So we have a plan to cut 10 million this current year and then 5 more each in the following 2 years. Now that's before the governor's, final state budget announcing that there may be an 8% base cut to CSU in 25-26. So now that 20 million base reduction will be a bigger number, probably another 10 million more that we are working on, how to address that both short-term and long-term basis. Next, please. Also, let's look at one-time funding. What do we have? So we actually have 27 million carry forward one-time money held centrally because we know that 24-25 is a tough year. We have 32 million new one-time money. That's our practice on our campus that we put almost 1/3, actually more like 30% of our non-resident tuition revenue. We don't put it in base. We use those dollars as one time to fund things that are maybe pilot or truly one-time in nature. And then we have several things in red, meaning their expenditures. So we need to cover the 4 million base deficit we looked at earlier. So we'll use one-time money to cover that. We also have 41 million of one-time expenditures that are considered non-discretionary, like, for example, to fund startup packages and some other deferred maintenance, a long list of things they're considered actually non-discretionary that we must do. And then plus our share of the $5 million, that's our share of the 75 million one-time general fund cut announced by the governor in his June budget. So our one-time money, once you take all the new money carry forward minus the new expenditures, that leaves us about 9 million left. And that $9 million will be set aside to cover 25-26 anticipated deficit. Next, please. Also, another piece of information that in our July Board of Trustee meeting, actually the system CFO, Steve Rallier, presented to the board what his estimate, potentially that could be a $1 billion deficit for the CSU. What he did was he actually took the 8% budget cut plus things that he believed the system may need to fund fully. And then if we do all of that, it will be a $1 billion deficit for the CSU. So with that, I mean, of course, the system will continue to advocate with the state to show, them the needs that CSU has in 25-26 and try to avoid having the 8% cut. But meanwhile, we also have some one-time funding, held centrally, like what we just saw, in a previous slide, but also by division. So we are working with each division and basically say, try not to spend a one-time funding if we can avoid that and try to save it to address issues that we may have in 25-26. Next, please.
We have a little less than 5 minutes left and we would like.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'm almost done. But I wanted to say, it sounded like, it's a very challenging budget time for us, which is true. However, SDSU, we're in a much better position than most of our campuses at CSU. I'm sure some of you have heard about, Northern California, our sister campuses really have enrollment issues. For example, Sonoma State, the enrollment is about 40% below their target. San Francisco State, East Bay, some of these campuses really are having enrollment challenges. We actually don't. I'm sure you've all heard that, we have close to 120,000 applications for this fall 24. We have a strong brand. We have a lot of demand for enrollment. So that's something that's very positive for us. We also have, reserves, as I mentioned, one-time money that held by centrally and also by the division. That will give us a little bit longer runway to come to address the budget challenges. And we have always been very conservative in our planning, and that has, prevented us from overextending ourselves in the past. And we also have very diversified revenue streams, so that, we are not relying on the state budget as much as before. The state funding is only, in the 20+% of our total, budget. However, having said that, the campus still need to continue to work hard to balance our budget and try to balance it with our growing expenses, with our limited resources. Next, please. Do want to emphasize that, the campus will continue to invest in high priority programs. Programs that are strategic and critical, will continue to invest in them. So we will do more in certain area with more resources. However, that means that we also have areas that we have less resources, programs that have lower priority, maybe they're not essential. We need to do less with less, because we cannot continue to do more with less, right? So some ideas, some example of, how do we delay some of the spending? Maybe we can slow down on, maybe delay some of the vacancy filling, and reduce some of the PBAC allocation. We will continue to work with the campuses to look at also program efficiency and make adjustments accordingly. So that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We have maybe a minute or two for questions. Are there any? If so, please raise your hand. Senator Pappen, you're recognized.
Yes, I like these central budget discussions and presentations, but then we never seem to get a feel for what this ends up meaning at the division level, the college level, and the department level. Will the Senate see some of these details moving forward?
If it's something of interest, I'm sure we can invite, for example, divisional resource manager. They can, go into more details on what does it mean when it comes to the division level.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Pappen, if you have specifics, get them to Senate officers and we will follow up. Senator Shomay, you recognize?
Thank you. I think I would also like to see, in this discussion when we are doing less with less, how the administration is going to do less with less as well, perhaps, so it's not just us, faculty, not just us, students, but how is the administration handling this? How many fewer AVPs you might want to hire, for example, and so on and so forth. So, so I'd like to see some numbers and some efforts on that level as well, as we are talking about all these budget issues. Thank you.
Yeah, just wanted to let you know, actually, we're doing less and less across the board. We're just not leaning on one particular group or the other. We are having a lot of these conversations already among the leadership team as well. Yeah.
Thank you. And our last question is Senator Carter Curtis.
Thank you, Chair Rutherford. And thank you, Dr. Long. I also wanted to find out, you mentioned something about FTEs and you talked about unit increases per student, so going up to 15 as a minimum. I'm in the advising world, and so I just kind of want to find out how I know that it's not, one of the questions or concerns I have is that whether or not that's in line with our advising model of keeping our students at the core, because I don't believe that every student, especially as they get into their upper division work, can handle 15 units because of the, they may be non-traditional students who are working or taking care of families. And so I just kind of wanted to get a little more on that and how you're navigating that slope too.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I don't know if Provost is here, but we recognize, this is a goal, but we also recognize not all students are in the positions to take a bigger load, right, than what they're taking. You know, some do have works and or other obligations, but there are probably also students that can take more. So I think, you know, we will need advisors to work with us to help, you know, work with those students that who have ability to take, you know, closer to full load. And it also help them to graduate, you know, on time, right? If you need to graduate in 4 years, you know, closer to the full load will help you get there. I don't know if Provost is here that want to help address that, or?
Yogi's up next for his report, so we'll have
Okay,
him.
all right, good. We'll ask him to address it then. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, VP Nickerson, and also AVP Little. We will now transition over to interim provost Tom for his report.
Thank you. I have 3 quick topics, so I'll go through some of the slides quickly and just mention some highlights. First, let me talk about enrollment, and this is okay. Can you resize? Okay, great. So this is the first year enroll, and we are sitting about the same as 2 years ago, 6553. This is as of this morning. And this is the first year enroll. And the next slide is showing transfer. Again, we're somewhere between last year and 2 years ago. And we've been trying to make sure that for those colleges that can handle, we've been providing more students. For those colleges that are kind of maxed out, we are trying to not overload them too much. So based on individual colleges, how flexible and what kind of capacity they have. So as you can see, it's not as high as last year. Next slide. So new graduate students, similar. Last year, there was a big drop because of my SDSU issues, partly because of my SDSU issues. And we have recovered from that this year because we had to, as some of you may remember, it was quite late, and we couldn't admit process graduate applications as well because of my SDSU hiccups. Okay, next slide. So Imperial Valley is doing well. It's growing because they have new degrees now, nursing being one of them. And as some of you may know, that we hire a few tenure track professors for environmental health. And so we'll be creating new degree programs, and also with the governor's $80 million Lithium Valley building, we will have for the first time wet labs, science teaching labs in the valley. So our nursing majors and all the other science major will have their own science labs. Next slide. So our retention rates are doing well, both for transfers and first-year students, and we want to keep them up. And this is very important. As the president mentioned earlier, the pressure we have to have more and more FTEs, and our budget is really funded by FTEs, right? Not the head count. So we really need to have all the units available for all the students who want to take the units, right? The average is 15.6 is the target for low division and freshman level. And for transfers, the target is 13.6 units. Some students want to take more, some don't, not as many. but that's the average we have. Next slide. So as of this morning, we are above the target of 3%, 3.4%. Now remember that our original target was 3%, right? And then the Chancellor's office added another 2% late July. And so now we have to shoot for a higher target so that we don't get any kind of cuts that they're threatening for 24, 25, 26. So we will have to work hard to get these numbers up. Especially spring semester, we don't have a lot of flexibility, right? And not as much as fall semesters. So we'll work on that. I want to thank all the chairs and directors and faculty who are willing to create more classes, more class sessions. Those who have the capacity to do it, thank you for doing that. Next slide. So that's the enrollment update, and I want to give a quick update on tenure track searches. Okay, so in spite of all the budget challenges we have, I've been putting tenure track lines as high priority because we really need to have those lines up and try to save money elsewhere and get as many tenure track lines as possible. So this year we managed to get 51 lines. Okay, all the 51 searches are now approved and all the searches are in progress. Including one additional clinical scholar line because that particular college prefers to hire as a clinical scholar. So those are all in progress. My third topic is, do you want me to pause, Nola, or continue?
Please continue because we want to get to the space issue.
Okay. So that's the third topic. I have the team from Vice Provost Sonia Pruitt-Lord and Eric Henson, and also maybe Marguerite, maybe not, I'm not sure. And those three are here to present the next few slides.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you to the Senate. We'll begin with our slide deck. Thank you. So we're coming here with you to share some preliminary recommendations related to the allocation of space so that we can work to advance the SDSU mission, work towards the academic master plan, and support the campus's larger strategic plan through our allocation of space. In alignment with CSU policies, space is not designated to any one individual, but rather to campuses and to divisions. And so that's a broad system-wide space policy. And this is then how do we make use of that in our recommendations to move that forward. Next slide, please. So today, there is more in this slide deck than we'll go over in this short period of time, but wanted to make sure that we had enough information for other for your review. And so we'll share a little bit about the project timeline, the charge, and our current level of recommendations. Next slide. So this is a timeline, a project that began in May of 2021 with the Space and Facilities Advisory Committee that was charged with developing a process to develop campus-wide policy for space management. And there was a consultant who group came in and asked conducted benchmark and analyses and met with a number of listening sessions with faculty, staff, and students across campus. There was a survey that was done, and then the Space Facilities and Advisory Committee met with this group to review findings and recommendations. Once that was done in April of 2024, the interim space management committee was created to work towards a set of space management recommendations that would be unique to this campus to the Council of Vice Presidents. Next. And the partial kind of charge of the SBAC group was to work with that consultant and look at an audit of our current space, developing some policies, procedures, and structures, begin to think about how we could best use the space, renovate spaces needed, make sure that we're allocating space and planning for future allocation needs. From there was the interim space management committee that was developed that was charged to create some principles and policies for space management. How do we prioritize our space needs on campus? What procedures are available for managing space requests? How do we come up with a transparent financial structure and reporting of space? And then to begin to create a membership for a larger committee and develop a communication plan. One of the things that's important to think about in this charge is that it's campus-wide space. So also thinking about our space really for research, our space as relates to our auxiliaries, and so a holistic approach as opposed to one that was just division specific, so that we can then recognize that we need more space in a particular area as the campus needs change, or if there's a particular research project or a particular student success initiative that we would like to think about space being borrowed from another area in which it was previously conceived. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this group was to ensure effective and efficient use of space resources. How do we integrate into institutional planning efforts? How do we allow for data-informed decision-making within a transparent and visible structure? Identify and manage space types, utilizations. Where do we have surpluses? Where do we have deficits? We know that we continue to have a need for more space, and how do we make sure that we're using the space we have at the highest and best use? How do we proactively plan for future capital investment as well as divestment of and acquisition as possible, and an understanding of the total cost of supporting and developing space. And with this, I'm going to turn it over to AVP Hansen, who I believe is on the call.
Hi there all. So one of the things, as we outlined, is that we wanted to make sure that we had principles that we could agree upon. So those were basically these 5. The first was authority, that all space is university space. The second was a process for allocating space. We wanted to be consistent, data-informed, fiscally responsible, and transparent. Third, the prioritization of that space. We wanted to make sure that we are always supporting university strategic priorities. In terms of decision rights, we wanted to make decisions at the lowest possible level, but ultimately reserve the rights for decisions with the president and delegated to the provost and vice president from BFA for final decisions if needed. And then from an assessment standpoint, we want to have an annual assessment of assignments reviewed annually, working with the various colleges and divisions so that we know where folks are. Next slide, please. We also wanted to identify at least the top 5 priorities in terms of how space was going to be allocated or managed. The first was for emergencies. So this is really those unforeseen items that may happen and need immediate prioritization. So sometimes these are related to flooding, power outages, things of that nature that really are unexpected. The second is temporary use, and we call this swing space. Essentially, this is maintained to accommodate short-term temporary use for things like emergencies, but also tenant improvements if someone's having space renovated or what have you, and other unexpected needs. We have new opportunities occasionally for temporary use that come up. The third priority is reassigned occupants. So units or individuals impacted by having to move out of their existing space due to decisions or reasons beyond their control. Sometimes there is a need for a new space due to new buildings being constructed and so forth. But being able to reassign those folks to new locations. The fourth priority was new needs. So this is coming new needs that were not otherwise had space assignments for them previously. And then the fifth priority is the changing of existing needs. So this is to accommodate growth, changes, or consolidation of space. So when we're looking at various limited resources or limited space availability, we would go through this rubric of sorts to identify those priorities. The other things that we wanted to do is also have what we called criteria or considerations to be part of that milieu of decisions. So the first was the space allocations must remain consistent with space intended and permitted use. So we unfortunately have converted some classrooms into labs and labs into classrooms. We really want to mitigate that as much as we possibly can. Academic activities, classrooms, and research space have priority over administrative activities or offices. Space assignments that save money, enhance revenues, or encourage interdisciplinary collaboration will be given priority. Requests for additional space that include returning existing square footage for footage to the university space will be given higher priority than those that do not. So if there's consolidation or what have you, that'll always be higher priority. When possible, programmatically similar or supporting units should be located near each other. And then space allocations that satisfy those long-term plans take precedent over more temporary accommodations. And then the space requests requiring unplanned, unfunded major construction will have the lowest priority than the spaces that do not. Next slide, please. And in that space prioritization, kind of no space is created equal. So the first area that we always want to give the highest priority to is the instructional space. Then the research, scholarship, and creative activities. Next is the co-curricular and community space, and last is the office administrative space. So again, wanting to have the highest level for this instructional space, making sure that we're utilizing the SDSU policy file guidelines for use in that utilization rate. High impact RSCA areas for the second area, critical health and wellness spaces for the curricular and community space, and then offices, the principal would be one private office per faculty or staff member, and we know that there are exceptions and those would be considered.
Our proposed governance structure is an important piece of this is that we want space decisions to be made at the local level. And so there would be college space and divisional space committees that would make decisions within the space allocations that they have. And then a space management committee, the coordinating group that meets weekly to look at any of those kind of emergency needs or temporary swing space needs that are on a more temporary basis with non-voting support provided by a number of our colleagues across campus. So relating from planning and design and facilities and research foundation and IT, environmental health and safety. Then the space management committee, which would be meeting weekly, and then eventually the space management executive committee, which includes the provost and vice president and Ms. Wong Nickerson and the president. So again, the governance structure responsibilities is that we do want space decisions to be made at a local level in which those campuses, those divisions and smaller units would create their own internal procedures for the evaluation of space requests and develop metrics to determine the utilization and prioritization of their own internal space needs, recognizing that research needs or space needs for the scholarship activity is going to look different at different levels. And move on to the next slide. And this is what brings us to how we want to get this information shared with each other. So we shared in the spring of 2024 to the Council of Vice Presidents, to the Space Facilities and Advisory Committee in summer of 24, and targeted groups beginning now, which would include divisional leadership, the academic affairs team chairs and directors, to the Senate exec, to the larger Senate here, to enrollment services and the University Research Council, with the goal of going through a version of this slide deck. Now we'll open it questions, I think, to any part of the provost report.
So we have a couple of minutes for questions. Are there any? Yes. Chair Lack, you're recognized.
Thank you so much. I have two questions for Interim Provost Tong related to faculty hiring. The first question is, you mentioned that there were 51 new lines allowed for this year, and I'm curious to hear how many separations we've had and what the total net gain in faculty lines will be for this year. And the second question related is, given our huge enrollment, how will hiring be prioritized for contingent faculty, whether that's hiring additional contingent faculty or expanding their contracts, giving them more classes, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so the first question, this year especially, the budget is really tough, right? I've listened to other provosts across in the system, and they have barely have any new searches going on. And so we definitely are relying on some separation. And this year we don't have as many because for a good number of good reason. One of them could be people want to wait it out. But we definitely do not have as many separation this year, and we don't have as many lines as we were hoping for. But 51 is not not bad. All the deans, as you probably remember, the TPMP committee members were invited to participate in our academic affairs retreat back in April. Right, we rank all these lines, and most colleges, their high priority lines were approved and ranked really high. So we're I think okay in that respect. I wish we had more lines. Obviously, we want certain colleges are really maxing out. For example, business, right? Fowler College of Business, their enrollment increase is the most compared to some of the other colleges. So we have to look at a lot of different things. FTES being one of them, not the only thing, but one of the parameters, right? So we look at it, and as far as tenure and density and lecturers, and we talk about this briefly at the chairs and directors retreat that the president mentioned earlier. Back in August, and we prepared some slide decks, and that will take some time. So we would love to talk about that at the next APMP or TPMP meeting, and then we'll go over them in more detail. Yeah.
Thank you. Last question, Senator Shomei, you're recognized.
Yeah, just a quick question. It seems to me that enrollment is a major driving force for us because we want to meet the enrollment targets and so on and so forth. So my question is related to those classes that might not enroll, maybe according to expectation, but they're still crucial for the university to be a university. So how are we going to manage that? Like I'm thinking of, let's say language classes. So how are we managing those discrepancies between highly enrolled classes versus classes that are less enrolled but crucial to be called a university? I'm just wondering whether there's any central idea about that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe SDSU is a comprehensive university. We definitely want to keep it that way, and we're not using FTES as the only parameter. Otherwise, a lot of programs would have been cut already, right? So we have not, and I don't have any plans to do that. But the low conferral degree programs that we discussed last year that we submitted to the Board of Trustees, we still have to deal with that because they want to see how we're dealing with the action plans we propose, right? And a lot of them are really good. So I'm hoping that we can be successful and for most of those programs, and they are happy about it. And I really appreciate all the folks who work hard on that, and they actually come up with some reasonable programs. So we're hopeful.
Okay, so there's one final question.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know, I just
I'm
put
not
that,
looking at
everybody,
my-
I know, because everybody knows it's like.
There's two questions. Okay, sorry about that. There are actually two questions. We'll go with,
No, hopefully it's quick. I've seen this budget presentation, the enrollment presentation several times, and I think some of it's finally sinking in. So because we got this other request this summer to raise it even higher after we'd already accepted our class, after we were already in the middle of orientation, are we really supposed to hit 105% now? Is that what I heard you say? And we're 103.5, so we've got to come up to another 1.5% somehow this year to really, okay, all right.
So the
All right, that's
first,
how I get it, I got it.
the original target was 1,075 FTEs, right? So that represented about almost 3%. And then they added another 757
Okay.
at the last minute. That represents about 2%. So we had to shoot for 5%. Yes.
5, so it goes
Exactly.
1.5% back for January, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Senator Schultz. Okay, Senator Schellenberg.
One second. Did put his hand down briefly.
Yeah, but.
There we go.
Did it again.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you for that presentation. I was curious regarding enrollment, and I share this data with the Vice Provost a little bit ago, but if we look at from fall 20 to fall 23, I'm noticing substantial growth in one college in particular, my colleagues in Fowler College of Business. So overall from 20 to 23, overall enrollment at the undergrad level increased by 6%. But if you look at enrollment within the Fowler College of Business, it increased by 21%. And so I'm interested how, and I know there have been admission, the worst kept secret SDSUs are these emission pods. And so I'm just a little concerned to see that sort of distribution among colleges over time, particularly if we're going to see a greater increase in targeted FTE expectations. And I'm wondering, what is the vision moving forward? While there's always demand for business, there's also demand in other areas. I'm sure it's a very complex calculus for enrollment management. But I'm curious, that's a pretty stark difference, overall 6% increase, but within the college, a 21% increase. So really more of a question for the path forward than anything else.
Yes. So yes, there's one particular college have grown quite a bit, but we have also kind of flattened them out a little bit because they have reached capacity, right? So we don't want to overwhelm them. And so this year is not as high for them. And there are other colleges who want more. So we've been giving them more. So we want to accommodate everybody who want more or less, fewer students, and of course, in some areas we're limited by the type of building or labs we have, right? The wet labs and those we don't have enough of. So we can't, we're teaching 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. already, some of the science labs. So there are some limitations, but then there are other areas where they want more students. So we've been able to accommodate some of that. If AVP Stefan Hyman is here, he can add some more.
Well, unmute Stefan Hyman.
Yeah, he's in and out.
Yeah, I'm here. Just really quickly to respond to that. If you actually look at the composition of our incoming students, you'll actually see that we really started to flatten out the number of incoming students in Fowler. In fact, this year, actually, we have one of our largest incoming classes in Cal that we've had in a very long time. We have a much larger increase in College of Education, for example. Now, part of what has also driven the growth overall in Fowler over the last couple of years has also been internal transfers. So that's one of those issues where the students were admitted to a different college and then wind up migrating into Fowler. So I think that's also something we have to take a look at in terms of just what are those patterns taking place, why are they happening, and what are some ways that we can make sure that students understand the value of all of our programs.
Thank you, everyone. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. And we've got about 8 minutes remaining in our meeting and a huge amount of work still before us. Thank you all for your reports. We really appreciate it.